Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Ronald and today we're going to be talking about the books I read in January. So this is something new I'm going to be trying where I kind of just do like monthly recaps of the books that I read. Before we get into it, I want to give some warnings. First, of course, is a spoiler warning because I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in depth. It's not going to be like full going through the plot, all of that, but it's still going to be spoilers. And the other warning is the dog warning. Like right now, we've got a second reading buddy with us. Y'all know Pepper. Now, meet Ginger. Hi, Ginger. Girl. Ginger. If you hear noises in the background, whether it be jingling, whining, paw prints, whatever you want to call it, it's one of the dogs. So let's get into this video. So in the month of January, I read 3 books. I read Dracula, I read Jane Eyre, and I read The Two. Today is January 8th. I'm going to talk about what I plan on reading this month. So this month I plan to read Jane Eyre, Dracula, and The Two. So The Two, I have been reading that since last year. I'm going to be honest, the only reason I'm reading Dracula and Jane Eyre, it's not only because I have movies recorded on the DVR, but that is a huge proponent of why I'm trying to read them. I have multiple adaptations recorded. Yeah, so I'm trying to get those out of there. And then Dracula, I think I got that at the same time I got Jane Eyre. I was interested in reading it, but I've just never gotten around to it. So I've started reading it this past year. I'm up to chapter 7, and I'm trying to finish that out because I have a lot of those adaptations on there that I need to get out there. So those are the books I'm reading this month, and we're gonna see if I'm successful at reading them all. Dracula is a book I've had since high school, so of course, like most people, we all know Dracula the character, but I've never read the book. And I remember like I was on like this book forum and I read this comment that said Dracula in the book was a lot more terrifying than how he's depicted in like all of the adaptations. So I was like, oh really? I ended up getting the book in high school and I just never read it. I never had a chance to read it until this year. So what led to me reading it this year was I was on a book forum and somebody was ranting about it, but I couldn't really read the rant because I hadn't read the book because I didn't want to be spoiled. So I was watching this video on this lady, this historical video about this lady who had been like considered a vampire princess. So when they got to the part about her and her being a vampire princess, of course they started talking about Dracula. So I had to pause the video because I was like, I don't want to be spoiled. So that's what led to me going to read the book so that I could go read the book and then go back and finish the video. So it's early in the morning on January 15th, and I wanted to give an update on where I was with like my book reading. In Dracula, I'm halfway through. Dracula, I'm kind of having the same issue I had with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where it's like you're already kind of like familiar, like the premise of the story, and it's probably would be like shocking and horrifying, which don't get me wrong, some of the things that have gone on in this book, in this first half of the book, have been truly horrifying. Like poor Lucy, poor Mina, having to find out that Lucy died through the mail. Poor Jonathan and what he had to go through. But I say all that to say that I feel like the full effect has kind of been dimmed because Dracula is such a popular character in media. And it was the same way with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where the effect of the story was kind of dimmed for me because it's such a pop culture phenomenon. But I'm still enjoying the story. And yeah, I plan to finish it this weekend. It's January 15th, like towards the end of the day, and I'm on chapter 19 of Dracula, right? And it's just been a lot going on. So, Lucy. Poor Lucy. That's all I can say, poor Lucy, and what happened to her. And it's hilarious to me how Mina has been like super instrumental to this whole operation of them like going from regular people to vampire hunters all of a sudden. And yet Mina conveniently has to go sit on the side and not do nothing, even though she's been super instrumental in getting them to this point where they're at in the book. I'm intrigued because I'm like, we finna hit the final battle, so what's finna go down? And it's hilarious to me how this book is called Dracula and it's about Dracula, but he's barely in the book. I'm ready to see how this final battle goes down, especially because Renfield just sat up here and warned Dr. Seward and said, don't say I didn't warn you, because I tried, I did my best. So I'm like, well, what's finna go down? So it's January 16th, and I am on chapter 22 of Dracula, right? This vampire, because he's not a man, done attacked Mina in her room, and it's all Renfield's fault. Because Renfield is the one that let him in. The story is starting to come together, and I've got about 5 chapters left to read. So I'm intrigued to see how this is going to end, because it's kind of seeming like a race against time now, because the man has started turning Mina, And it's like, we need to get this figured out before this girl ends up like Lucy. So today is January 16th. I finished Dracula, right? I did enjoy it for the most part, but there's a certain part in the book where we get the revelation that Dracula has like a child brain. He's smart and clever and cunning, but he has a child brain as a vampire. And so after we got that revelation, he seems to be like a teenager. So everything he did, everything he said came across like a teenager. And so I couldn't take him seriously after that, which was kind of disappointing because I had read that in the book he was a lot more threatening than he's always been portrayed in all of the adaptations. I still thought it was a good book though, so I gave it a 4.5. So now I'm about to start watching all of these adaptations that I recorded because I seriously need to get them off the DVR. So first I'm going to watch probably most well-known Dracula movie from 1931. Even though it's not recorded, I need to watch it because it's very influential on how the character is seen. And I feel like it's probably going to influence a lot of these characterizations in these other adaptations that I have recorded. Baby, they just said forget the mystery. We just gonna give it all away right at the beginning. And there he is, the man himself. Okay, so now I'm confused. Is this supposed to be Mr. Harker or Mr. Renfield? I had to pause the movie because I am very intrigued. I knew going into this that this movie was not very faithful to the book because it's not an actual adaptation of the actual book. It's an adaptation of a stage play that is an adaptation of the book. So this is just the movie version of that stage play. But I'm very intrigued because it seems like they've taken Harker's beginning part and given it to Renfield. So now I'm like, so how is this finna work? How are we finna tie Harker and everybody else into this? I'm curious to see how this goes. So I've just discovered how they plan to connect everybody else to this dynamic now that they've changed all this stuff around. Whose idea was it to change Mina to be Seward's daughter? Why? Why did we make that change? Is he and Lucy gonna be a thing? I'm gonna just see how it goes because I'm just like, how is this whole friend group finna work if everybody's of different ages? So I just finished the movie and I had to come rant because I have such mixed feelings on this movie. I want to start this off by saying that Bela Lugosi as Dracula, amazing. He did great. But whoever wrote that play, they need their butts whooped. I went into this movie knowing it was not going to be faithful to the book because it's not a direct adaptation of the book. It's an adaptation of the play that is adapted from the book. However, how do you take a cast of such dynamic characters in the book and completely make them all useless in the movie? Like, everybody was useless. Mina, Van Helsing, Seward, Harker, all of them were useless. Harker spent most of the movie running around yelling Mina. Mina was a boss in the book, okay? A huge part of the reason anything got done. And in the movie, what does she do? She ain't do nothing. They didn't even really resolve Lucy walking around biting these kids. Why did y'all even include that in the story if y'all weren't going to resolve it? And even Dracula himself, he's not as threatening as he was in the book. I have such mixed feelings on it because I know how iconic the movie is. But if I'm going to be honest, the way they did it kind of flopped with me. I'm trying hard to see it as its own thing and not like compare it to the book, because I know it's not faithful to the book. Even as its own thing, I don't know if I really like it like that. Because what were we doing? How do you take such good dynamic characters who were all like really good in the book and then just make them all so flat in the movie? Like, they did nothing in the movie. They did absolutely nothing to stop Dracula. I do want to add on to my thoughts about the movie. I would like to start off by talking about what I did like about it. I did like, once again, the portrayal of Dracula. It's a good portrayal. I didn't really mind them giving Harker's beginning portion to Renfield because it does explain how Renfield got into the sanitarium, how he met Dracula, how he ended up his servant. It does give an explanation in the movie, whereas the book, it didn't really give an explanation for those things, but an explanation wasn't really needed in the book. And another thing I did like was how like Mina was kind of having like that little turmoil with, trying to fight to stay human, but being quickly turned into a vampire. Part of her wanting to, trap Jonathan and turn him too, but another part of her wanting to fight to keep him safe. And so I did like the concept of that, of like Mina quickly being turned, already acting out some evil intentions towards Jonathan. But the problem is it really wasn't utilized all that well, and Jonathan's character is so flat that the storyline mind, it doesn't make sense for Jonathan to be so love-struck over Mina to the point that he would ignore what is told to him to protect her, because in the book he doesn't do that. That's an example of what I mean by the characters are like flat in the movie and are taken from such dynamic characterizations in the book. Because Jonathan, yes, he has that moment of despair after she got bit, but for the most part he mans up and he does what he needs to do to help her get back to normal. In the movie, like I said, all he do is run around yelling Mina, Mina, Mina. I also want to say that this is not a rant just because this movie is like super old from like 1931, because the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie, which was made because of the popularity of this Dracula movie, came out the same year and had the same exact circumstances as this Dracula movie, where it was an adaptation of a stage play based on the book. I enjoyed the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie, knowing that it wasn't faithful, because all of the changes that they made, I feel like they brought something to that story. This Dracula movie didn't bring nothing to the story. In fact, it took a lot away from the story. So that's why I didn't like it. That's why I didn't enjoy it. Like, they did nothing. The lore in the movie was inconsistent. Part of the reason it was inconsistent was due to studio meddling, because during the editing process, the studio messed with the editing process and switched around scenes. And so people have said if you watch the movie in the order it's intended to be in, it makes a lot more sense. So I'm willing to cut the movie some slack on some of the plot inconsistencies, but I just didn't enjoy the movie as much as I was hoping I would. But there were some things that I did like about it, so it wasn't like a complete fail with me. I hope these other adaptations are good, because this one, in my opinion, it fell a little flat with me. I came back to say that I might have to rewatch this film with fresh eyes, not coming straight off of finishing the book. Because I feel like that's where the heart of my rant is with the book fresh in mind. So I might need to watch this a little bit, like maybe down the road a little bit later, when I haven't really read the book like that. So now it's time to watch the adaptations I actually have recorded on DVR. So the first one is Horror of Dracula, so let's do this. Now, who thought this was a good idea? I want to know. I want names. It look like paint. Now, why do this look like they recycled the set from The Pit and the Pendulum? So now Lucy is Harker's fiance, Lucy Homewood. So what happened to Arthur? Where's Mina? What's going on? Now I want to know. So far we're off to a good start, but I'm curious. We just met Mina, and it's looking like she's Lucy's stepmama. I'm just wondering why some of these changes were made in these movies. I'm very curious. So Mina is Lucy's sister-in-law. So now I'm wondering, through who are they connected? Because if Mina is married to Arthur and Lucy was engaged to Jonathan, does that mean Jonathan and Mina are now brother and sister? That's a very weird change if that's the case. Or are Arthur and Jonathan brothers? I'm very confused on this family tree. It's become clear. Lucy and Arthur are brother and sister, which is very strange because in the book, they were engaged. So I just finished The Horror of Dracula, and I hate to say it, but I enjoyed it a lot more than the other Dracula movie. It wasn't all that faithful, but it was still enjoyable. Like, the story at least made sense, and the characters at least, like, put forth some effort to stopping Dracula. Like, I feel like my main issue with the 1931 movie was that they did a whole bunch of talking, but when it came to the actions of actually stopping Dracula, they didn't do anything. Another thing is how in that movie they say that he'd be so successful because nobody would really believe in vampires like that because it's so far-fetched. But literally all throughout the movie, everybody's talking about vampires like it's a known thing. And I'm like, we need to get this lore to match up. Like I said, I might have to watch this when I haven't come fresh off of reading the book. Even though I watched Horror of Dracula coming fresh off of reading the book, I still enjoyed it for what it was, even though it was nowhere near faithful to the book. The characters actually did something in the story. Now I'm finna watch this Dracula trilogy. I don't really know what I'm expecting from it because before reading the book, I had heard that there was not really any true faithful adaptation of the book. Like, each adaptation tends to do its own little thing with the story, so I'm not really expecting too much from this adaptation, but I hope it's a good movie at least. No, because this was a really good shot. I really like this, how this looked. And here this lady go investigating this vault that's been opened. She know it's not normally open. Why she ain't just close the vault and go and call the authorities? Now she wanna go investigate and look, she gonna get caught up in whatever finna go down. Cause she wanna be stupid and investigate. Child, never mind. She is the mastermind behind this. Of course, so that's why she investigating. Cause she's making sure the job getting done. Cause she the mastermind behind the whole plan of what's going down. But what I said stand, cause she gonna be dumb enough to get herself caught up with whatever's down there that she thinks she looking for, cause it's not gonna be what she expect to find. Dummy. So we're 30 minutes in. They're all dead, and they've unleashed Dracula. And so now we have Van Helsing's descendant, who's gonna have to come and stop him. I'm intrigued to see how this is gonna go. So they just revealed that Dracula in this movie is Judas. Like Judas from the Bible. I'm crying. So, would I be wrong to say that I was enjoying Dracula 2000 up until we got that reveal of who Dracula really was? Like, I was really enjoying it. Like I said, I knew it wasn't gonna be faithful, and I was kind of low-key enjoying it. Like, I liked how, like, the little throwback to the beginning and, like, this actual book. I liked how the story is a book. But it turns out that the book was actually true, and so Dracula really does exist, and Van Helsing is really Van Helsing. I like some of the updates they made, like how they kept some things from the book story, but made updates to it, and how they fit it into the world. I did like that. And I'm not even gonna lie, I was enjoying the movie up until we hit that reveal of who Dracula really was. When I seen it, I was like, Judas from the Bible? Of all the people it could have been, why him specifically? Why not just let Dracula just be himself? Like, he had a whole lore in the book that you could have just drawn from to use in the movie and just let it be like literally how it was in the movie. The book is based on real life. Like, Van Helsing was who he was, so why couldn't Dracula be who he was said to be in the book? Why couldn't he be who he was? Why he gotta be Judas from the Bible? I will say though, it was hilarious how Dracula pulled up Simon and Mary talking about the Bible is propaganda, but as soon as Simon opened them pages and they started attacking him, them pages was whooping his tail. So I'm like, for this to be propaganda, this show was scripture show was hitting you and hurting you. Very interesting. However, I will say though, even though the reveal kind of like killed the movie for me a little bit, I see why they chose him, because it does kind of tie together a lot of the things that affect Dracula. It was stupid to me, but at least the identity that they chose made sense. And you know what the saddest part of this all is? Even with all the updates and setting and characters and name changes and all of this movie was low-key still more faithful to the book than Dracula 1931 was. And the crazy part is that it's not even an adaptation of the book, because the book in the movie is a book. And so now I'm confused, because it's 2 more movies after this. But Dracula supposedly died this time. So now I'm curious how this is finna work. So can somebody explain to me why these people always automatically just jump to vampires are real in these movies? Also, apparently Dracula didn't die, he just burnt up, but he's still alive. This seems like a straight-to-DVD movie, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because, I like me a good little straight-to-DVD movie, even though they be a hot mess, but this one is just seeming very straight-to-DVD. Y'all, look at this makeup. Oh, okay. I did look it up. It is straight-to-DVD. I was right. So I'm about halfway through the movie, right? And I just realized this is Flambeau from Father Brown. If you've never watched the Father Brown TV series, it's an amazing mystery series. And I've been staring at this man for the longest time trying to figure out where I've seen him before. It's Flambeau. Y'all, would I be wrong for saying that the vampire hunter should have been the vampire? I'm just saying. He seems to look more like Dracula from the last movie than the person that's supposed to be playing Dracula in this movie. Do somebody want to explain to me how this vampire hunter, who been fighting everybody and winning, get to the final battle and lose? It's giving RPG. This is a 2-part. I mean, I knew there was a 3rd movie, but I didn't think the 2nd and 3rd movie were gonna be a 2-parter. This didn't need a second part because the first part out of these two, this movie, was trash. There was no plot. What is there left to do? Like, I cannot believe they made sequel bait for a straight to DVD movie that nobody asked for. Upon further review, it has been discovered that the second and third movie are actually one long movie that the studio decided to split into two separate movies. But really, it's supposed to be one long 3-hour movie that's supposed to go together. So the second movie is really just the first half and the setup for the entire plot. So I just finished the third movie, right? Why was the third movie better and more entertaining than the second movie? And remember how I said that the vampire hunter should have played Dracula over who we got? Why did he become Dracula at the end? I enjoyed the third movie more than I did the second movie. And like I said, the first movie was enjoyable up until we got that reveal of who Dracula really was. So overall, I think for the most part, enjoyed this trilogy of movies. They were enjoyable for the most part for what they were. So the movie's already started, but I'm watching the final Dracula adaptation that I recorded, which is Blackula. Now, if we're being honest, Blackula is not even really an adaptation of the book. It just uses the Dracula character as a plot device, but it's related to the story, so it counts. And plus, I wanted to watch it, so it is what it is.
You shall be Dracula.
So I just finished Blackula. I enjoyed it. If I'm going to be honest, I would say it definitely ranks among the favorite of the adaptations that I watched, if not arguably the favorite. I like that Blackula has some nuance to him. And then he went out with some dignity too. I like that. And also, apparently, this movie, just like the 1931 Dracula, inspired a black Frankenstein and a black Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, just like 1931 Dracula inspired a Frankenstein and a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde movie to be made the same year. So I think that's interesting how both movies inspired the same characters to get adaptations and how we got black versions of those characters. So I thought that was interesting to learn. But I did enjoy this movie. I thought it was fun. I read Dracula and I gave it a 4.5. That part where we got to the part where it's like, oh, he's kind of like got a child brain, that really just kind of killed the momentum for me a little bit because everything after that I saw him doing as a teenager. But I did enjoy the book overall. I enjoyed the characters. I don't know why these adaptations kept making changes to their characters and changing relationships and stuff like that. I did enjoy the book. I did. Jane Eyre is a book I've had since college. Jane Eyre, I have been trying to read Jane Eyre literally since college. And the reason I have not been able to finish is not because I don't like the book. I actually really do like the book. It's just every time I sit down and try and read this book, something comes up where I'm not able to finish. First time I read it, I made it up to the part with Helen Burns. And then right when I made it up to that part, college got busy. So I wasn't able to finish in college. And then I tried to read it in 2022 as part of like my books that I was reading for research for writing The Disappearance, but I started reading it in October, and by that point we were already like trying to finish up writing The Disappearance, so The Disappearance took priority, so I didn't end up finishing it. This time I don't have no distractions. I don't have nothing that should take me from finishing this book because I just finished writing and put out The Tide of New Beginnings, and I'm in my rest period after spending a whole year writing that book. So I should have no distractions. I should have no reason not to finish reading this book. As far as Jane Eyre is concerned, I've decided to just pick up from where I left off because I've literally read that beginning part like 3 times and I don't want to read it again. So I just kind of spark notes the chapters I did read, just to like refresh myself on anything I didn't remember, but it seems like I remembered all of it pretty well. So I'm just going to pick up from where I left off, which was chapter 15. So today is January 24th, right? I'm reading Jane Eyre. I think I'm on chapter 18. First of all, Mr. Rochester, how you gonna sit up there in this girl face and ask her, oh, why you didn't come say hi to me in front of the party that you're hosting? She's a governess. She's trying to stay in her place. She didn't even want to be down there, but you requested that she be down there. I've already had some parts of the plot spoiled to me just because Jane Eyre is so old and a lot of people have read it. So the part that I have has spoiled to me. I'm trying to see how it works in, but I'm still intrigued by this story. We're just gonna see how this goes. So today is January 28th. I'm on, I think, like chapter 25 of Jane Eyre, and I'm still waiting to see like why everybody hates Mr. Rochester so much. Like, don't get me wrong, he can be a bit abrasive at times, but I'm waiting to see like why everybody hates him. I know it has something to do with marriage, and he's proposed marriage to Jane. So I'm like, is this the part where we finally find out why everybody hates him so much? I'm just curious to see what's going on, but I really do like Jane. And I kind of wish she'd just stay single and not have fallen in love, but we're gonna see how this goes. So I just finished chapter 25, and the dream sequence in that chapter, I'm starting to see the influence on Rebecca. The dream sequence reminded me of the dream to Manderley in the first chapter. I'm starting to see the influence a little bit. Okay, so I just hit the big twist, right? So I knew going into this that Rochester had a wife because I'd had that spoiled for me. But I thought the wife was gonna be Celine Varens, the mother of Adele, right? I did not think that this man's previous wife was gonna be Richard Mason's sister. I was wondering how Mason figured into this, and now I know that's his relative. I need to finish the chapter because it's going down. Poor Jane. The clergyman is as shook as I am. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm seeing the Rebecca influence. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the influence on Rebecca. I'm seeing it. Poor Jane. Poor Jane. This man hit a whole wife and told her not to worry about it the whole time, knowing he had this lady living in the house and nobody told Jane nothing. So after this point, now that we've gotten to the part that I was spoiled on, I don't know what's going to happen in the book. So for the rest of this book, now I'm really just reading to see what's actually going to happen. Today's January 29th, and I'm on chapter 33 of Jane Eyre. She's left Rochester. She's gone to this village. And she got her job as a schoolmistress now, right? She's become friends with the Rivers family, and John just tore this paper out of her art book, right? I'm thinking he's discovered her true identity because she's there under an alias, Jane Elliott, because she doesn't want them to know her real name. I'm thinking she had her real name on that paper. My first theory is that either Rochester has put out a reward for telling him where she is, and John is going to capitalize on that reward because he ain't got no money. If it's not that, my second theory is that Jane is the relative of them somehow. Somehow, in some way, she's related to the Rivers family and stands to benefit from the situation. But we're going to see if I'm right on either one. But I am liking the book so far. So today is January 30th. I finished reading Jane Eyre. It was amazing. I liked it. I don't know who's worse, Mr. Rochester or St. John. Mr. Rochester, he lied to Jane, but St. John was sitting up here trying to manipulate Jane using the Bible into marrying him when that was not what she wanted to do because she didn't love him and he didn't love her, and they both knew this. Not to mention y'all was cousins, but that's a whole other discussion for another day. So I don't know who's worse. Overall, I did like the book. I did enjoy it. I can definitely see the influence on Rebecca. It's like Thornfield Hall reminds me so much of Manderley, especially both of them having the same fate. Even them ending up with who they ended up with in the books, I was like, okay. So I can definitely see the influence, but I did enjoy Jane Eyre. I did. So I'm about to watch the many of the Jane Eyre adaptations that I have recorded or on streaming. I'm finna watch the first one from the 40s. I'm excited to see how this gonna go, especially because they got Joan Fontaine playing Jane Eyre. And she also played in Rebecca. And Rebecca is influenced by Jane Eyre. So I'm excited to see like the little similarities and differences between the characters and how she plays them both. Because she did that in Rebecca. So I'm excited to see if she's gonna do that in Jane Eyre too. So we gonna see. So, they open the movie with what's supposed to be chapter 1 of Jane Eyre, right? Except that is not chapter 1 of Jane Eyre. I literally paused to go check and see, like, if I was misremembering. I'm not misremembering. That was not the first chapter of Jane Eyre. Y'all, I'm sorry. I couldn't be Jane. I don't know how she did it. I couldn't be her. This movie, The movie is good, but the foolishness that they put in Jane through, seeing it on screen makes me realize I couldn't live her life. Y'all, they got Jane acting like Lady, which, isn't surprising because Jane was the inspiration for Lady, and both of them were played by the same actress.
Oh, stop it, oh, stop it.
But while she went out the room crying after the governess comments in the book, she sat up there and ate all them comments. She didn't leave until Mr. Rochester wasn't paying no attention to her. But in the movie, they got her running out crying because they said governesses are terrible. I'm gonna need y'all to give my Jane the spirit that she had in the book. This is supposed to be Jane. This ain't Lady. So I just finished Jane Eyre, and this movie said it was going to do what it wanted to do at the ending. How come Jane didn't get to meet her family at the end of the movie? Y'all had Doc Rivers in the movie. Why we didn't ever get the connection that they're related? So I'm finna watch the other adaptation of Jane Eyre that I've recorded. So here we go. Y'all, not Jane is Alice in Wonderland. Also, we're starting off with her leaving Rochester, and this wig is terrible. So I'm almost to the end of this movie, right? And I've been enjoying it so far, but we just got to the part where Jane discovers that her uncle died and left her his inheritance, right? She's with St. John, and she's like, oh, let me be a sister to you, like she was in the book, right? Except the movie, for some reason, has cut the very important piece that her uncle is also their uncle. So now instead of them being cousins, now she's just like, oh, let me just be a sister to you, like a friend sense. And I'm just like, I know why they did it, probably because they wanted to avoid that implication of cousin no marriage. But come on now, that is an integral part of the book, because Jane finally discovers she has some family, number one, but also number two, it no longer makes sense for her to share the inheritance with them if they're not related no more. At least it doesn't make sense for her to split the inheritance 4 ways between her and the cousins, because now they're not related no more. And it's like, so she's just gonna give 3/4 of her inheritance to her friends to thank them for saving her life. What sense does that make? Like, come on now. So I just finished the movie. Aside from that one little complaint I had about them cutting them being her cousins, I did for the most part enjoy the movie. Now we're getting ready to watch our next adaptation of Jane Eyre. It's the 2006 miniseries. This one's on Hulu, so this is the first one I had set to watch once I finished the book. So now we're watching it. It's 4 episodes long, but on Hulu they combined it into 2, so it's 2 2-hour episodes. So yeah, I'm ready to watch. So let's do this. I just finished the miniseries. For the most part, I thought it was good, but they did make a lot of interesting changes and interesting decisions concerning the narrative, and I'm not sure why they made them. It's like they were like small changes, but they were like big enough to be significant, if that makes sense. I will say that their portrayal of St. John probably has been the closest to how I felt reading him in the book. Super irritating. It's the only adaptation so far that's actually kept Jane and them being cousins, so I will give it that. But overall, I did enjoy the miniseries. I also want to make a record. So when I was watching the 2006 version, I was like, Thornfield looks like the Thornfield from the 2011 version, right? Come to find out, it was the Thornfield from that version. They reused the same building in 3 separate adaptations. If I'm being honest, it kind of looked like they barely did the bare minimum to change them around to make them look any different. They look the exact same in both movies. I'm just saying. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, Thornfield looks like the Thornfield in every other movie, and it's because it's been in like 3 different movies. The same place used as Thornfield. So I'm watching the final Jane Eyre adaptation that I have in my possession. It is the film from 1970. I discovered I had it on DVD on this great cinema collection. So this is the last one in my possession that I'm going to be watching. I'm kind of interested to see how it goes because I've seen a lot of people say that this is like one of the better adaptations of the book. So I'm excited to see how this goes. So I'm not all that sure about the faithfulness of the adaptation because it's already made some changes. But the changes they've made have been pretty impactful to the narrative. So for example, instead of Helen's hair being cut off, it's Jane's hair that gets cut off. But some of the changes don't make sense. Like, Helen has a guardian now, so I'm like, why is she at Lowood if she has a guardian? Is it now a case of like something similar with Jane? What's going on? Why would she be there if she had a guardian she can go home to? But I will say that for the most part, the movie has been okay so far. So I just finished the 1970 adaptation of Jane Eyre. Let me start off by saying this. Out of the 4 that I watched, this 1971 would probably be my least favorite. And it's not because they made a whole bunch of these changes and weren't as faithful as I was led to believe about this adaptation. My thing is, first of all, Jane didn't really seem like Jane in this adaptation. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but she just didn't seem like Jane. What was the point of introducing St. John and his sisters if they were only going to be in 10 minutes of the movie? They ran through that whole part of the plot with him in it in 10 minutes. And this movie is almost 2 hours long. Y'all focused 10 of the minutes on St. John when he was in over half the book. Somebody make that make sense to me. That's just what was the most irritating part, because it was like, if y'all were going to do that, y'all might have just went the 1940 whatever route. They didn't even bother showing him in the movie. They did something entirely new when she left and came back. And it still worked for that film, and I liked it. I don't know, this adaptation, it does not rank amongst my favorites. And I don't know if it's because I'm just burnt out on Jane Eyre and I was just trying to get through this last one, or if I truly just did not enjoy it as much as I did the others. But I will say it's not amongst my favorites for the adaptation of what I've seen so far. So I ended up reading Jane Eyre, right? I enjoyed it. I gave it a 5 out of 5. First of all, going into it, I already knew Rochester had a previous wife because I had accidentally had that spoiled for me once again, being on book forums. People was talking about the characters they hated most, and Rochester kept coming up. And one person started talking about why they hated him, and it was like, oh, because he had that wife, da-da-da. I'm like, wife? What wife? Keep in mind, in all of my times reading the book before this first time, I had never even made it to Rochester showing up. But like I said, I thought the wife was Celine Varens, because what I had been spoiled on was that he had a wife living in the attic. And I thought the wife was going to be Celine Varens, because, you know, we got that whole story about Celine and how he was in love with her and she's Adele's mama and he don't believe Adele's his child and all that type of stuff. So, you know, I'm thinking it's going to be like some obsessed type stuff. Like he done trapped her and he got her living in the attic. I don't know what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like kind of like something like a thriller. Because, you know, the Bronte sisters, they be going there in their books, okay? Because Wuthering Heights was a ratchet hot mess, and I enjoyed it. I gave that a 5 out of 5 too. So I'm going into Jane Eyre like, what's finna go down in here? I understand why people hate Rochester, because yes, he did have that wife, he did lie. But St. John, I think I dislike him more than Rochester. You could at least make the argument that Rochester actually cared about Jane, actually cared about her well-being, even though he was lying to her. That don't mean I support their relationship. I'm just saying, he at least seemed to care. But St. John, he didn't care about Jane like that. He cared about her like on a basic human level, and that was it. And then gonna sit there and try to manipulate her into marrying him, talking about some, if you don't do it, you're gonna go against God's will. I was like, first of all, St. John, it's not God's will that Jane sit up there and lead an unhappy life married to you because you done manipulated her into marrying you. Like, no, God's will don't need manipulation. Overall, I did enjoy Jane Eyre. I did enjoy the book. I do see the influence of Jane Eyre on Rebecca. You got similar protagonists, and like they both kind of like end up in situations. First, they have similar origins. They come from regular backgrounds. They don't come from money. I will say this, the development of Jane and Rochester's relationship was a lot more believable and a lot more organic than the development of the relationship between Lady and Max. Lady and Max, that was a 2-week little fling that turned into a marriage, and Max did not prepare her for Manderley at all. Like, at least Jane had the experience of living at Thornfield Hall before becoming Rochester's wife and all of that type of stuff. At least she had that experience. Lady, she didn't get nothing. But I do see the influences as far as like the protagonist coming from regular backgrounds, husbands that are very complex and very polarizing, definitely keeping secrets, lying about these wives they had previously. Even Thornfield Hall and Manderley themselves, they have similar fates of both being burnt down. But I will say that Manderley was a lot more like creepier than Thornfield Hall was, but I think that's the point. Like, Lady comes into Manderley not knowing nothing, not prepared for nothing, whereas Jane, she's coming to Thornfield Hall to be a governess. And it's not like everybody there was being mean to her, treating her like she didn't belong. She already knew what her position was. I see the similarities, I see the influence between both books, and having read them both, I think they were good. So the final book I read in the month of January was this book called The Two. This book right here, The Two. This is an indie published book, so let me read the synopsis to y'all. The synopsis reads, on a seemingly ordinary day, brother and sister Matt and Val wake up to discover that all of humanity has strangely vanished without a trace. Abandoned in their deserted community, they must rely on each other in order to survive. When a bright green light appears on the horizon delivering new team members onto the planet, Matt and Val join ranks with the team as they embark on a quest to find answers and unravel the mystery. A thrilling action adventure, The Two is a story of two siblings turned unlikely heroes entrusted with the fate of humanity. So how I got this book is very funny. So the year is 2022, right? I just got done writing the first book in the Creek series, which is Creek. Go purchase it. It's available. Go purchase the second book in the series, The Disappearance. Go purchase the third book in the series that just came out, The Tide of New Beginnings. Go purchase the novella. Like, go purchase it. Go get yourself caught up on the series. I promise you. It'll be worth your time. So I published that, right? And so the company I published it through, I ordered my author copy, right? So typically when you order an author copy of a book, it takes about a month to get here because the author order is not a priority as opposed to customer orders, right? So, you know, we wait about a month and this is what happens when it arrives. So my book just got here today and I just wanted to do a quick little unboxing while I'm here in the truck. So here we go. This is not my book. Oh my gosh. Okay. So as y'all clearly just saw, when I opened that package, that was not my book that I pulled out of that package. The book I pulled out was The Two. So I'm like, what book is this? So my theory on why I got this book in the mail instead of my book that I ordered, my theory is that, you know, me and the author of this book, we live in the same region. And our books came out around the same time. So I believe they just made a mistake and sent me their book. So what ended up happening was I had to, had to go through and like submit a little order complaint talking about something. Y'all did not send me the correct book. It took another month for me to get my actual book that I ordered. In fact, if you go watch my documentary on Creek, you will see I don't have the book in that documentary. I had to ask Tati to send me photos of her copy of the book because I didn't have my book. So of course I submit that order complaint and I'd end up not having to return the book. I get to keep it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to keep it and I'm going to read it, see what it's about. So as y'all heard in that synopsis, it's described as like a thrilling action adventure that's like about these two siblings that's going to figure out what happened to humanity because humanity just one day just mysteriously disappeared off the face of the earth, except for them two, right? And then it's this green light that be dropping in like new people every week, right? Well, having read the book, I want to start this off by telling you, if you do choose to get the book and read it, do not go into it believing it's going to be a thrilling action adventure about these two siblings trying to figure out what happened to humanity, because that's not what the book actually is. This is also actually the first book in a series, as I've later discovered. So the book after it is probably like going to be what this book was advertised to be. But this book is actually about Matt and Val discovering that humanity has disappeared off the face of the earth and going into survival mode. It's not about them trying to solve what happened. It's about them trying to survive after the fact. Today is December 12th. I have been reading this book called The Two for like the longest time. I feel like so far the story is an interesting concept, but the way it's being told is not the most efficient way to tell it. Honestly, like I would say the first 2 chapters are really good, really do a good job of pulling you into the story. The main issue I have with this book so far is a lot of the chapters, they could be sentences or paragraphs. Like honestly, all this book really needed so far, to my knowledge so far, is to have some of these chapters cut down to sentences and paragraphs. And not only would it make the pace of the book move a lot quicker, but it would be a lot easier to get through and read. Because the writing is not terrible. It is a little bit stilted in some areas, but I have my own theory on why that is. I believe the author is bilingual because some of the phrases they use in English, they sound kind of stilted, but if you were to say them in Spanish, they would make perfect sense. Overall, the writing is not terrible. I just feel like it needed a little bit more editing work, but overall, it's an interesting concept. Today is December 20th, and I just had some thoughts on The Two because I have read about half of the book now. Like I said before, I feel like this needed some editing work. It has such an interesting concept, but I'm just gonna be really honest. The storyline is kind of going a little bit all over the place. Like the pacing could have used a little bit of work. I'm gonna just say this. I read like the first 20 chapters back in, I want to say July. So it could just be the case of me coming back in like all these months later. But like, we have this relationship between Matt and Jen. It's kind of like coming out of nowhere, if I'm being honest, because like Jen showed up and all of a sudden Matt likes her, and it's like y'all literally just met. I'm just curious to see how this book is finna go, because I got half the book left to read, and it's like, what's happening here? As of right now, my opinion is still this book needed a very strong editor. That is still my opinion of the book. So the two, I have been reading that since last year. I'm halfway through it. I was trying to be done with it by the end of last year, but I just decided to push it off into this year and finish the latter half this year. Like, I'm just gonna be real honest about it. So what the book promises as the plot and what it should be focusing on, that's not really the focus right now. I feel like we're spending too much time on the romance of the main characters, which honestly kind of, in my opinion, came out of nowhere. But I will also say that I've been reading this like sparingly. It's not like I've been like flying through this. Like, you know, I've been reading it like a few chapters a month at a time. I'm saying all that to say that it may seem out of nowhere because it was a minute before I came back to read it, when it might not have been out of nowhere. But I will say this, what I've been saying about the book so far is just basically what I have to say on it. I feel like it needed a stronger editing job. I feel like it has an interesting concept, and I feel like we're spending too much time on the romance and not enough time on what the plot should be about, which is finding out what happened to humanity. Today is January 24th. I'm on chapter 34 of the two, right? And a new girl just showed up. Keep in mind, the premise is all of humanity got wiped off the face of the earth except for Val and Matt, these two siblings in Texas. But every week, this mysterious green light comes down and drops somebody new on the face of the earth. I think we all like, what, like person number 7 or 8?
Ugh, another new girl. This is like the 18th replacement.
And so this new girl just showed up. Why, when they gonna meet her, they being mean to her? What y'all being mean to the new girl for? Like, this is not the Bad Girls Club. Like, what are y'all doing? So then, like, she asked them, you know, what's going on and what the situation is and what are they doing about it. And Matt's like, nothing. Baby, I'm halfway through this book, so what am I reading this book for if y'all not doing nothing about the situation? Like, y'all told me that y'all were gonna figure out what was going on. Y'all started the story off coming up with theories and ideas and trying to figure out what's going on, and now y'all just sitting around doing nothing except sitting around going on dates and going fishing and doing nothing. And meanwhile, the whole humanity on the face of the earth is just gone. I'm really truthfully and honestly hoping that this girl comes in and shakes stuff up and gets them back to doing stuff, because them just sitting around doing nothing is not cutting it, especially when I got 30 more chapters in this book. I'm not finna sit up here and read 30 more chapters of y'all doing nothing. That's number one. Number two, we done introduced some of these characters and they're not doing anything in the story. Like, yeah, there's these central characters, Matt, Val, Carly, Jen, Sam, that are not doing nothing. But then there's the other characters that are literally not doing nothing in the story. Like, they're not even part of the story to even do anything. Like, they just showed up and then just went on about their business. Ain't seen them, ain't heard from them since. Like, if we gonna bring in characters, we need to do something with them. Like, come on now. But yeah, that's my little update on the two. I'm on chapter 38 of the two, right? I'm over Jen, I'm over Matt, which unsurprisingly, those are the two that are in a relationship together. And I feel like I'm reading a bootleg Bad Girls Club. Like, Angel is the new girl that just came in and everybody's being mean to her for no reason. Y'all insulted her when she first showed up. Y'all have continued to make jokes about her, talk about her attitude, talking about how she's not getting along with everybody and how she seems so left out. First of all, it's 5 of y'all and she's the odd one out. And then y'all talking about how she's not really nice to y'all. Y'all insulted her when she first got there and y'all continue to insult her and talk about her behind her back. So why are y'all surprised that she don't like y'all like that? Like, the only person being nice to her is Val. I'm just kind of over Jen and Matt, because Matt is supposed to be the leader, but because he's letting Jen lead over him, she's really the one leading all of this, and I just can't stand her. And I just really want Angel to just put her in her place. Angel just came in seeming like she was just gonna get everybody back on track and get us back to what the plot is supposed to be about, which is finding out what happened to all of humanity. But no, instead she's trying to fit in. And I'm just like really annoyed because they keep talking about how Angel's not trying to get along and they keep making it seem like everything she does is wrong, when in reality, no, Matt keeps doing stuff wrong to her. And everybody else just being a little itty bitty follower behind him. Like, I'm so sick of these characters. I need us to either get back to what the plot is about, or I need somebody to come in and shake it up for real, because I can't. Today is January 29th, and the only thing I can think of while reading this book is Matt starting a harem, because he's supposed to be with Jen, but he's spent some intimate time with Carly. Now he's spending intimate time with Angel. Jen is completely fine with it. I'm like, is this man starting a harem? Like, I'm on chapter 41. I got 20 more chapters because it's a 60 chapter book. In my honest opinion, I don't think this book needed to be 60 chapters, but it is what it is. So I got 20 more chapters to go. So today is January 31st, and I am 10 chapters from the end of the 2. I am very ready to be done with this book. You know, I've kind of come to the realization that this book is not necessarily about Matt and Val trying to figure out what happened to humanity. It's more about them surviving after most of humanity has become extinct. And so with that revelation, it's become a little bit more enjoyable to read. They did have another person drop in that brought some comic relief that was actually a little bit funny.
Another new girl. I don't want to get to know you. I don't want to know who you are. I don't want to know where you're from. I could care less.
I feel like the middle just kind of dragged a little bit, but it's kind of picking up towards the end as far as like the story. So I'm interested to see how it's going to end. So today is January 31st, and I just finished the 2. It was an interesting concept. I feel like the execution was a little bit spotty in some parts. I still believe after finishing it, it needed a strong editing job. A lot of these chapters could have been paragraphs, could have been sentences. But overall, the book was okay. And it ended on a cliffhanger. And I know there's a second book, so I don't know if I want to get that second book or not, because I don't know if I'm all that invested to find out what happened. But yeah, I finished it. It was okay. So with that being said, my thoughts on it after having read it, I feel like it was an interesting concept. It had a good start. The middle, around like halfway through, kind of started dragging a little bit. And it has a lot to do with the characters that were being introduced into the storyline. Around the halfway mark, the characters that get introduced have no real bearing on the plot. They don't show up at all beyond their initial appearance. If they do show up beyond their initial appearance, they don't do nothing in the plot. They're either there for like comedic purposes or like just to provide like little filler stories where like we get to know more about the core group, which is Matt, Val, Carly, Jen, and then like all the other characters that come in. If I can be honest, like I said when I was reading the book gave me bootleg Bad Girls Club by the time we hit about halfway through. After we get the core like 5, Matt, Val, Carly, Sam, and Jen. After them 5 show up, every character that came in after them was either like they had to prove themselves to be worthy of living around the core group. First they had to go through pre-approval through Sam, which makes sense because he's basically like the bodyguard of the group. But then they had to like ingratiate themselves with the other 4, and it became annoying after a while because it was like every character that came in after them 4 was like instantly disliked. Like they didn't like them off the rip. They would talk smack about them. They would be rude to them. They would insult them, all type of stuff, and then get mad when the characters don't like them. It was like, we're the cool kids and y'all are the ones coming into it and y'all got to prove yourselves to be part of our group. And I'm just like, it couldn't be me. Towards the end, I don't know if I can say it really picked up or if I just came to the conclusion that this book was more so about them surviving and not actually solving what happened. Once I got the realization, my outlook on the book and how I was taking it changed. And then the other thing, of course, like Matt is like the last man on earth. So like we have this subplot of like all the women characters aside from Val. They're not necessarily vying for his affection because he's in a relationship with Jen, but basically like they all like spend like alone time with him because he's the only man on earth and they all just desperately need a man's touch. But overall, I thought the book was okay. I feel like the book could have benefited from a stronger editing job. I feel like some of them characters could have been left out. They weren't necessary at all because they did nothing and they brought nothing and they provided nothing. I feel like the concept was interesting. So those are the books that I read in January, and that's all I have to say on it. Thank you for tuning into this video. If you liked it, give it a like, a comment, and a subscribe, and be sure to check out my channel. I'll see you next time.